And welcome everyone. We should be live. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you are indeed in the chat. Let me know that you can hear me properly. So we are live from London, from the city of London at the moment. Hi Ronnie, nice to see you here. So we are live. Let me know in the chat that you can hear me. If any of you have clicked on this video and you've not got a clue what you've clicked on, this is a live walking tour in London. We've got about 10 minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. You can hear me well. Perfect. Thank you, Tish. Most of you know the drill already. I'm gonna have to test the microphone. So what I'll do is I'll tap it 3 times. And you'll have to let me know if you've heard that. Let me know if you've heard the tapping. If at any point through the tour you start hearing some wind noises or any type of annoying noises, let me know in the chat. Yeah, the swans are gone. It's been a while. I actually forgot when I did, I used the picture for the thumbnail. Silly me, I just forgot. So you'll see in a moment they're gone. Do I still have my cool steampunk earrings? Nikki is asking. No, they broke. I've bought some similar ones, but they're not exactly the same. They're just a bit bigger and they tend to get trapped in things. So I still have some steampunk earrings, but not the same. You've heard the 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you very much. And welcome, Sandy. Nice to see you all here. So we've got, let me tell you exactly, 7 minutes before to officially start. No, Laurie, I didn't lose it. It broke. Literally, the metal itself broke. It's funny you asking today because I've literally just binned it yesterday. I still had the broken one, but there was nothing I could do with it. It's funny because I just binned it yesterday. I was like, I'm never gonna do anything with this, so I just put it in the trash. You hear me well. Thank you, Matthew. Oof, I've just got a lot of message in one go. Oh yeah, Ronnie, I don't know what's happening with your Facebook. There was a second one. I first accepted the friendship and then I deleted it because I thought it might be a scammer. So if I've deleted you, I do apologize. I thought it was a fake. Right, let me see. We've got 5 minutes to go. So if any of you are completely new to me, you're very welcome. Do feel free to say hello in the chat. If you're watching this and you're like, I've got no chat, it's probably because you're watching the replay. So if you're watching the replay in the next few weeks or months, you wouldn't be able to interact in the chat. You can always drop a comment and I'll reply, of course. Or you could have the chat replayed. It should be somewhere underneath. If you are on a computer, you can always have the chat open to see the replay. Because this is a live stream, sometimes I might be reacting to something in the chat. So it's always nice to have it open to see what's happening. Oh, you've had a nightmare with Facebook. Oh, sorry to hear that. I hope you get your account back if you've lost it. Oh, you're in Facebook jail. Have you been banned or did you get your account stolen? One earring looks like... Do you mean today? I think they're full today. Oh, thank you, Sandy. Yeah, I try to be responsive. And welcome, Pauline. Oh, you were suspended and then off again. Okay. And welcome, Rosemary Charlie. I didn't know there was anything special with the moon tonight. I thought it was just a full moon, but that would make sense though, because there were quite a few photographers on London Bridge. They were taking pictures of the moon right above the Tower Bridge. I thought it was just a full moon, but there might be something more to it. We'll see that in a moment anyway. We'll see the moon. It's a blood moon, okay. Well, we'll go and take a look at the blood moon. Okay, let's see what time it is. 2 minutes to go, 2 minutes. So there's an eclipse on a blood moon. Ooh. What time is the eclipse meant to be? Right, let me gracefully stand up, because I think we've got 1 minute to go. It disappeared in 10 minutes. Cool. Right, let's see. Oh, the blood moon is the eclipse. Okay, cool. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, let's see. Yeah, 1 minute to go. Cool. Well, we'll see the moon anyway, the normal full moon, on our way as we cross London Bridge in a moment. Which is fine. I'm not too disappointed because I didn't know there was anything going on with the moon today. So it's all good. And welcome, Sarah. Welcome everyone that just joined. Welcome to London. It is nearly 10 p.m. UK time. And let me see, it is officially time to start. So welcome everyone, and without further ado, I'm gonna flip this camera around and let's go. So we are here at the foot of the monument. The monument that was the monument to the Great Fire of London. It is to remember the victim of that tragedy. Because if the monument was to be laid down on the floor, it would fall right down there on Pudding Lane. So that's the site where allegedly the Great Fire of London started. It is said to be a baker that didn't extinguish his fire properly. And you know, flour, it's very inflammable. So when you have a lot of flour in the air, and Pudding Lane was like a giant street food street, you know, with all those kids roasting chicken and all that, and bakers and everything. Now, if you see a church down here, that's St. Magnus the Martyr. It's a church that used to have the London Bridge at its foot, and it's quite, let me move away, I'm in the middle of the road. It's quite a cool church to visit if you come to London, because in the church they have a little maquette of the old London Bridge. So it's quite nice to see, and it's quite realistic. Now, we are in the city of London at the moment. So when I say the city, I mean the old city. And we'll cross London Bridge and we'll end up in Southwark. So we'll leave the city. So you have a lot of business buildings around me. That's because it's the city. It's going to be fairly quiet tonight because there's a TfL strike today. So there are a lot of trains that are not running, well, underground and stuff. So a lot of people have tried to go straight home if they did try to come down to central London today. We had a half marathon as well, so a lot of people came into town anyway, but they probably wouldn't be hanging around too late tonight because they want to get home. It doesn't really affect me because I cycle everywhere. Anyway, let me show you. This building here, excuse my finger, but that one here, that's the Fishmongers Hall. And it was in 2019 the site of a terrible, terrible tragedy. A double murder or an act of terror even. There was an event that was being held that day, kind of like a workshop or like a class, like an event that would bring young people, young workers, as well as prisoners. So people would have come out of jail for a day to assist the event, and everyone was mixed together. The prison system in this country is not too bad. To be honest, there are a lot of initiatives for prisoners to try to get them ready to get back into society. We might have talked about the clinker restaurants that are managed by the sister of the Duke of Westminster. You might have heard of the Green King restaurant, the Green King pubs. They have a training school in some of the prisons to train some of the prisoners to become cooks and then have a job at the Green King pubs when they come out of prison. And so there are a lot of initiatives to try to reinsert people into society. And that very day was exactly one of those. You can see a lot of people waiting at the bus stop. It's because of the strikes. So that very day was an event like that where they had invited prisoners as well as members of the public to assist some kind of a lesson. The day went very well. And about lunchtime, one of the prisoners, one was missing. There was a young staff. His name was Jack Merritt. He was going to look for one of the prisoners that wasn't in the main room. The guy was called Osman Khan. And Jack didn't come back, so then another one went to look for them. Saskia Jones had also not been seen, another staff member that was helping those prisoners. And it turned out that Osman had, out of nowhere, gotten a knife and killed the two of them in the basement. Now, the crazy thing about this story, it's that then Osman ran out of the building and he ran on London Bridge there. And the two people that managed to tackle him to the ground and stop him from killing many, many more, those guys were criminals. Both of them were murderers. Well, plus another staff. But it really questioned who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. Those two had been convicted for murder. One was a murderer, the other one was actually convicted because of joint enterprise. Joint enterprise, it's a law in the UK. When you're there at a murder scene, even if you're not the one that did the fatal blow, you can still be convicted of murder if you don't do anything to stop it. Anyway, so, you know, I don't want to say the T word in my tours because YouTube doesn't like the T word, but so basically that Usman, that prisoner that tried to create an act of terror, and he did. I mean, he did kill 2 people, but he was stopped by 2 people that were criminals themselves. So they went from being murderers to heroes. And then eventually, as he was tackled to the ground down there, the police intervened, and the police actually shot him dead. So the T guy, he was dead on the scene. But and the guys that were out of prison, they actually took a tusk from some kind of an underwater animal, whatever it's called, a whale, or so they had a big tusk to try to stop the guy. So yeah, an interesting story. Anyway, before we go much further, let me show you the building on the other side. There's not much to see now, but it's the Adelaide building. It's named after Adelaide. She was the wife of William IV. Not my favorite monarch. William IV, he was the one that kind of managed to slow down the abolition of slavery. Anyway, that was one of the first office blocks in the area. Well, it was the tallest at the time. I think it's 1925 it was built. So that's what the rooftop would have looked like at the time. They even had some kind of like a mini golf on the rooftop. It is being refurbished at the moment. Apparently, it's gonna look quite amazing whenever they reopen it. Don't think it'll be open to the public. I think it's for the people that work in there, but that'll be quite cool. If you work in there, do invite me. I'd like to see the rooftop. Anyway, let's go down on London Bridge. So London Bridge, it's the famous one, famous for its history. Not to be confused, of course, with Tower Bridge. We'll see Tower Bridge in the distance. And welcome, Caroline. Nice to see you here. And welcome everyone else that just joined. Now, the moon has gone up since I walked my route an hour earlier. I always walk my route before the tour, so when I was here an hour ago, it was much lower, much closer to the bridge. So yeah, full moon as we mentioned earlier. So in the distance, that is of course Tower Bridge. Tower Bridge, that is the one that opens in the middle. It's not as old as it looks. Tower Bridge, it is Victorian, because at the time on the other side there you had a lot of docks. So they wanted a bridge, yes, but they wanted a bridge that would let the boats go through to access the docks. So they had a competition with several architects trying to design a bridge that would open. And the gentleman that won with the best design, his name is Sir Horace Jones. I said he won. He did win, but he was also part of the jury, so that helped. And he came up with this idea. So on street level down here, it's a bascule, so it splits in the middle to let the boats go through. And the platforms at the top, so down there, that was for the pedestrians. So while the bridge was up, pedestrians could cross over and back down. Great idea, but the bridge opens and closes in 52 seconds. Already at the time. So as you can imagine, the pedestrians, they didn't want to go like all the way up to cross over and back down. So they just waited like we do today. So because the bridge was not really used as its original purpose, it became a bit disreputable, let's say. A lot of the ladies of the night, they used it to wait for the sailors and the dockers, and that's part of the reason why they had to close it eventually in 1910. So it was never really used as its original purpose. Today the platforms at the top, it's an attraction. You could buy yourself a ticket to go up and back down. Just make sure you're not wearing a skirt, because it's a glass floor. Well, you don't have to walk on the glass, you could stay on the side. Anyway, so Tower Bridge, the one we are on right now, it is London Bridge. London Bridge, you might know, the one before this one was famously sold to an American investor. It is now in Arizona. You might have heard, a lot of people, including a lot of tour guides, would love to tell you that the American investor was a bit confused, that he believed he was buying Tower Bridge, and that he had a bit of a surprise. You know, when they built it back up in Arizona, he was missing his towers. Great story, but I'm afraid it's not true. As far as we know, the gentleman was not that stupid. He had come to London, he had seen the London Bridge, he knew exactly which bridge he was buying. Now, London Bridge, the most famous one anyway, was not the one that was sold to the American investor, it was the one before that. Let me show you if I've got a picture. Yes. So that's the old London Bridge. It had 19 arches and a lot of buildings on top. And it would take forever to cross London Bridge at the time because it was quite skinny. The traffic was mad. Some say that it could take up to an hour at the time to cross London Bridge. There's a little story, probably rubbish, but some say that the Lord Mayor of London decided to tell everyone to stick to the left to improve the traffic on the bridge. And that might be why we drive on the left today. It's all rubbish. We know that the Romans, they already drove on the left at the time because, you know, if you are on a horse carriage and someone comes in front of you and you want to start a fight, it's much easier if you are on the left inside because you can start a fight straight away with your right hand. Some even say that Napoleon was left-handed and he swapped things around on the continent, but I don't think there's any evidence of that. Anyway, so London Bridge, that's also the one you might know because of the little nursery rhyme. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. We don't know who's the fair lady. We don't actually know for sure why the London Bridge would be falling down. We did have a London Bridge that was destroyed by a Viking attack, but somehow we don't think that's why. There are many different theories on why London Bridge would be falling down. My favorite, it's that it might be because of a lady called Eleanor of Provence. As you might have guessed from her name, hi Lee, and welcome everyone that just joined. As you might have guessed from her name, Eleanor was a French lady. She had married the king, Henry III. So she was the queen consort, like Queen Camilla today. I think she was 12 years old when she married Henry, and Henry would have been like 29 or something. I mean, it was considered normal at the time, but anyway, she was a very fashionable queen. She would bring all the fashions from France and stuff, but she was not very popular. She was known to be using a lot of the tax money into her own leisure. The king was often aware, the king was often fighting in Gascony and stuff, so the queen consort was left in charge in London, and she was very unpopular. At some point, there was even a time so that's in the 13th century, when they attacked the queen. She was on a boat down there, and people would be throwing rotten vegetables or maybe even feces at her. Eventually, she had to go and hide in France for a while. Anyway, she was known to be using a lot of the tax money into her own leisure. There used to be a tax to cross London Bridge at the time, so people might have been singing to the Queen, London Bridge is falling down, meaning stop spending the money on yourself. We need repairs. So in that case, the fair lady would be the Queen. I don't know who that is, Tish, Audrey. Did you see them on the street? Julian, I don't know who those people are. What are you talking about? Did you see them on the bridge, or did I miss something in the chat? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, there's another theory. So some people think the fair lady would be the queen, but there's another theory that's much more sinister. We had a medieval practice called immurement. Some of you might know mur, that's French for wall. So immurement, it is to put something or somebody into a wall or into the foundations of a building. Now, I know it's very odd, but they did that a lot in medieval times with dead cats. Hi, Samantha. Hi, Disa. Yeah, they put, would you believe, they put dead cats in medieval walls. I know it's weird, but at the time they somehow imagined that the spirit of that dead animal would protect the building against all the misfortunes. It wasn't always cats, it could be chicken or anything. But yeah, very weird. And in Germany, in the foundations of a medieval bridge, they found the remains of a boy. So that's what led some historians to speculate that there might have been the remains of a lady at some point in the foundations of the old London Bridge. Oh, I see, Laurie, thank you. I thought you'd recognize someone on the bridge. I was like, didn't recognize anyone. Thank you. And welcome, Tanya. So the fair lady could also be the remains of a lady in the foundations of the old London Bridge. It is a bit far-fetched, but when you look at the lyrics, one of the verses used to say, "Take the keys on, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. Take the keys on, lock her up, my fair lady." Why would they say that? So maybe. Anyway, this is the shard up there, and the spikes. So the spikes is actually known as the needle. It is art and architecture at the same time. According to the artist, it has nothing to do with the spikes that used to be here. But personally, I find it's a big coincidence. Back in the day, at the time of the old London Bridge, we had some spikes on this side. And I'm sure a lot of you know exactly what we used to put on the spikes. Heads. The heads of the traitors that were beheaded at the Tower of London, they would be placed on spikes over here as a deterrent. And would you believe it was somebody's job title? It was the keeper of the heads. That was their job title. Their job was to collect those heads, to boil them, to preserve them a bit longer. Then they'll be placed on Then they'll be placed on a spike, and then the job was not over. The keeper of the heads, he had to check the quality. He had to check that those heads were not too badly rotten. When really they got too bad, his job was also to dispose of them. Usually straight into the river. And we used to drink those rivers, remember? Well, beer was always a bit safer. So yeah, personally, I think the idea of a spike could have come from those spikes. Officially, it's not the case. Officially, the spikes leads towards. So if you follow the line straight, it leads towards the church we mentioned earlier, Magnus the Martyr. But yeah. Anyway, let's try to cross when we can. Wow, see the amount of people waiting at the bus stop. This is because of the strike. I mean, we don't usually have 100 people waiting at a bus stop on London Bridge. So I'm glad we're not taking a bus tonight. I might even walk to work tomorrow morning. I've got to get to a job at the tower, but I could walk to the tower. It'll take me an hour. It's better than trying to take the bus on a day with strike at peak hour as well, so I'll probably walk it. Anyway, we mentioned that before in some of my tours, but look up here. We've got a little dragon. When you see the front of a dragon, you are entering the city of London. When you see the bums of a dragon, you're leaving the city. So if we were to cross back the bridge, we'll go back into the city, but we are not. We're going down the Nancy steps over here. Now I'm gonna try not to say anything too interesting for the next minute, because sometimes I have a little signal cut on the steps here, so it's probably gonna be fine, but sometimes there's a little dip in the signal. So the Nancy steps are very casual, it said Nancy steps. It is after the Nancy from Oliver Twist. Now, let me show you a little plaque to show you that you shouldn't always trust anything you read on a plaque, because this plaque is actually wrong. So I don't know if you'll be able to read properly because it's a bit dark. But it says these steps were the scene where the murder of Nancy in Charles Dickens' novel Oliver Twist happened. And that's not quite right. In the novel, Nancy is actually murdered in her bed. In the movie, the musical Oliver in the 60s, that's indeed where she was murdered, but not in the novel. So that plaque is wrong. There was a scene in the novel that happened here. That's the scene where she secretly met, so Nancy met Mr. Branlow. And there's a character, I think he's Noah Claypole, a boy that actually witnessed the scene. Exactly, Tish, they're liars. But yeah, it's a tiny little mistake, but it's a mistake because some of you might remember we talked about the murder of Nancy when we talked about Eliza Grimwood, that the murder was very much inspired by the murder of Eliza Grimwood at the foot of the Waterloo Bridge, not the London Bridge. But that's a story for a different day. We talked about that when we were in Waterloo. Now, we were talking about actor of terrors earlier. This very pub here, the Mudlark, that's where one of the pubs where people sheltered. You know, in June 2017, when we had another act of terror on London Bridge, a guy with a van that then jumped out and started stabbing people in this area. It was very bad around here. I have a friend, well, he's Italian, he's exaggerating a lot, but he was there on the night. He was sheltering in that very pub, the Mudlark, when he saw a bloody lady on the street. So he went out to help the bloody lady. And then they didn't let them back in the pub, because of course no one knew who the attacker was. So they barricaded themselves inside and they wouldn't let anyone in. So yeah, that was a crazy night that I think a lot of Londoners would remember. Anyway, this is Southwark Cathedral. We don't see much of the cathedral from here, but because it's a bit dark. There's a little exhibition inside of the cathedral at the moment. It is all about peace. It's called Dove Peace. Some of you might have seen pictures on my Facebook. One of our voyagers has been there and posted them. I'll show you one image. So it's a lot of little dove birds that have been made with paper, folded paper. That's full of notes from people, peace notes that were written by people visiting the church. So it's a lovely little message of peace in a time when we need it, really. It's only there until the 13th of September, so it's going to be gone soon. But yeah. Right, let me show you a view of London Bridge from here. It's always nice with the light and with a London bus on it. Now, there's a little interesting little urban myth or legend. It's probably not true, but it could be. There's a story behind the creation of Southwark Cathedral. At the time it was called St. Mary's Ovaries. And Mary, she was a young lady that lived around here. Her dad was a ferryman. You know, when we had only the London Bridge, the ferrymen, they made a lot of money by transporting people. Actually, that's why London Bridge was the only bridge for so long in London, for about 18 centuries, really. It's because those ferrymen they made so much money that they were actually lobbying Parliament to stop the construction of new bridges. And would you believe that worked until the mid 1700s, really? Anyway, so Mary's dad was a ferryman. He had a lot of people working for him, and he was a bit stingy, apparently. One night, he had an interesting idea. It is said that he decided to pretend to be dead. He thought if he was dead, all his staff and employees and everyone would mourn him. All right. Look, it's interesting to see what's underground in London. They forgot to turn the light off in the sewer here, so we can see a lot of the sewer. It's amazing to see what's... I mean, they forgot to turn the light off. Maybe they want the light on, I don't know. But it's interesting. You never realize how much is under your feet in London. Anyway, back to Mary. Mary was of course very sad. Her dad was dead, and that didn't work. So he was hoping that people would mourn him and they'll eat less. So he would very popular. So people didn't mourn him very much. They had a party. Now John he was actually alive. He was just pretending to be dead. So he was upstairs and he was furious. So he ran down to stop the party. And one of his employees that believed him to be dead believed it was a ghost. So he grabbed an oar, he hit him on the head. So then John fell down the stairs after being hit, and he died for real. Mary was, of course, ever so sad, but then she sent a letter to her lover. She said to him, "Daddy's dead, I'm gonna get the inheritance. Finally, you can come and marry me." Because I think the daddy didn't approve to the marriage. So the young lover jumped on his horse to run down to London to meet Mary and marry her. But he went way too fast on his horse. He had an accident and died. So young Mary, it is said, was so sad to have lost two of her loved ones because of money stories. She would have decided to put all her savings into the creation of the Priory of St. Mary Overies. We don't know if there's any truth behind it, but that's a nice little story behind Southwark Cathedral. We don't even know how old it exactly is. At least 1,000 years old, but some claim that it could date back to much earlier, like the 7th century or 6th century. We don't know. Now, we are now entering the famous Borough Market. The Borough Market is one of the oldest markets in London. It's about the same. We don't really know how old exactly. We've got some evidence of 1276, but it's probably much older than that. You know, because London Bridge was the only bridge in London, we had a lot of traffic on London Bridge. You had all the pilgrims going down to Canterbury, you had all the people going down to France or wherever on the continent. So when you have a lot of footfall, obviously it's a good place to come for trading. So actually the traders or the merchants of the city, they were a bit jealous. They tried to ban the market a few times. They tried to cancel it under the time of Charles II, but the market very quickly came back. So it's one of our, if not the oldest market in London, and it still looks quite old. That's why it's been used for quite a few movies. Bridget Jones, I think she had a snow fight with Hugh Grant in Borough Market. Harry Potter, quite a few movies. You can see it's quite atmospheric. And there was a murder as well. 1890, two traders, they went for lunch at the pub. Well, they went for lunch. They went to the pub at lunchtime. I don't know whether they had any food. They probably had much more drinks than food. And they had a quarrel. One was called Edward and the other one was Flash Alf. That's a cool nickname. I don't know why. No one knows why he was called Flash Alf. They had a quarrel, and Flash Alf grabbed his umbrella and he smashed it on Edward's head. The umbrella went through the guy's eye, so he was actually killed. The pub, we'll see the pub in a moment. Now it's the Market Porter, but it used to be called the Harrows. I think they rebranded after the murder because they probably didn't want the bad publicity. And so we've got 2 umbrella murders in London. Some of you might remember we've got another one on Waterloo Bridge. Now, of course, at this time the market is closed, but if you'd come here at lunchtime, the paella, this is a very fancy paella, you always have a line that goes all the way down to the pub. It's something I've never quite understood. It's because they've got some amazing food, but then you have to, there's hardly any places to stand. I never understood why people queue for so long to get a little portion of paella in the summer, it's nice, but in the winter it's busy as well, and people stand in the cold to have their street food that is almost the same price as a pub lunch. I cannot even say it, Nikki. Umbrella lobotomy, exactly. Right. Some of you might recognize this spot. This has been featured in Harry Potter. Let me show you the screenshot of the movie if I have it. Yeah. So that's where they filmed. When they have the magical bus in Harry Potter, they come with the triple-decker bus. They stop here, and then Harry comes out of the bus, and he actually goes upstairs in that bedroom there. And then there's another scene. The inside, it's filmed in the studio, but there's another scene where he looks over the window, and you can see the market and all that. So nowadays, it's been featured for 3-4 seconds in the movie, and every day now you have at least a dozen of Harry Potter tours that come down here just to see the spot. Now that is the pub, the Market Porter. So that's where the Flash Half umbrella murder started, and apparently all the actors from Harry Potter they were gathering in there through the filming as well. Now I'm gonna turn around so you get a nice view of the market on the Shard. It's nice when it's full moon because you get a bit more light for the camera. The contrast in London between the old and the new is always it's always amazing to see. Now if I show you the other side, this part of the market is a bit out of style because it's actually this part, so this very little part of the market, that's from Edward Middleton Barry. Charles Barry's son, the architect. That's the daddy. That's the one that did the Parliament. That was originally at the Covent Garden flower market, but they didn't know what to do with it. They actually sold it for £1, one symbolic £1, and it ended up here. So that's why now it's a bit out of style, but that's quite cool. In London, everything is mixed. You've got, you always have a lot of different styles mixed together, and it ends up looking very good. Anyway. Time to tell you about our serial killer of the night. A chap called Severin Klovski. Severin was born in Poland in a little village outside of Warsaw. He trained as what they called a felcher. It's some kind of a barber surgeon that worked with the army. The barbers, we talked about that in some of my tours before. The barbers, they used to do some microsurgery. That's why the sign, let me show you the barber sign. That's why the barber signs look like this, because the barbers, they used to have all those bloody bandages drying outside of their shops. So that's why the red and white to remember the bloody bandages that were drying there. So yeah, if you had a verruca to be cut out or teeth to be pulled out, you'd go to the barber. When you're good with scissors or knives, well, same, you might as well do surgery. So he was trained in that matter in Poland. We don't really know why he left the country. Did he commit a crime? Maybe was he escaping? Or maybe did he do some illegal abortions, or was he running away from a lady? We just don't know. He moved to London in 1888 or late 1887, and he moved to Whitechapel. Now, if I tell you London, Whitechapel, 1888, straight away you probably think Jack the Ripper. Well, the Jack the Ripper murders were not the only murders in London at the time. In 1888 in London, you also had the torso murders. They were body parts that were found mainly in the River Thames. And exactly like Sweeney Todd, Nikki, yeah. And some believe that the torso murders were actually from the same killer. And well, as soon as he moved into London, then a lady followed with 2 kids pretending to be his wife from Poland. And then she was never seen again. Some ripologists today believe that that lady was murdered and that she might have been one of the torso murders. It's a bit far-fetched. I mean, there's no evidence of that, but you know, it is a possibility. And when he was in Whitechapel, he lived on Cable Street, and his barber shop was literally meters away from where Martha Tabram was murdered. Although it was a year later. His barber shop at this spot was 89, but you know, he was very, very local to the area. Now, after that, he met another lady called Lucy Badeschi. He married her. They had a kid. Well, one died. At the time, they didn't see anything suspicious with that death. And then eventually, they decided to move to New Jersey. So they moved to New Jersey. At that point, we think he probably was performing some illegal abortions. He was making a bit too much money for just a normal barber, but again, no evidence of that. We know he was very violent with Lucy, and we know that for sure because she said, Lucy, that one day she was pregnant again, and she was in the barber shop when he became very violent with her when she was heavily pregnant, and apparently that was interrupted by a customer. Luckily, that probably saved her life. And apparently, after that happened, he had said to her, had that customer not walked in, he would have severed her head and hid her body. Now, Lucy was smart. Lucy ran back to London. Well, she probably didn't run, she jumped on a boat, but she left him. And then he actually followed her, but they never got back together. At that point, it's not quite clear whether he came back to New Jersey for a few months and then back here, or if he didn't go back. What we do know is that at that point in New Jersey, I think it's 1891, there was a terrible murder, Carrie Brown, in a hotel not in New Jersey, in a hotel in Manhattan, but he lived in Jersey City at the time, so it's not far. A terrible murder in a hotel in Manhattan. A lady, she was a sex worker as well, but she was brutally attacked. It was a butchery. It was very, very similar to the Mary Jane Kelly, the Jack the Ripper murder. Was it a copycat or was it the same guy? I mean, we don't know, but it could be him. Anyway, this beautiful building, you can see it's a former warehouse. That's a former crane here. So they probably would have stored some good at some point. Now it's a restaurant called, I think it's Casa de Frango, or a cheesy name. But back in the day, it used to be a restaurant called Native. And guess what they served? Actually, no, don't guess, you'd probably never guess. It's not something I would try, but they used to serve lasagna with squirrel ragu. Yes, you've heard this right. Squirrel ragu. Again, it was a different restaurant. It wasn't Casa de Frango at the time. It was a different restaurant. Yeah, I don't want to try. I mean, in terms of the planet, Apparently squirrel meat, it's the most sustainable in London. But no, they're so cute, I don't want to eat them. Right, I'm gonna have to cross over here. It's gonna be a tricky one, so bear with me one sec. Now, we were talking about the swans earlier. That's the spot where they used to be. So if you don't know what we're talking about, there was a lovely piece of street art by artist Jimmy C. Two swans looking at one another. It looked almost like a hurt. It's been a few, well, even last time we did this tour, some of you might remember it had been vandalized already. So they've just repainted it in black. It's a shame, but you know, street art is not meant to last. Street art is meant to be ephemeral. If you want to do a piece of art that would last forever, you paint on a canvas. So that's a shame. We loved the swans, but you know, hopefully something new might come up. Anyway, little pause in our story. We'll get back to Klovski in a while. But for now, let me tell you what's behind this wall. It was a graveyard for sex workers. Oh, you'll pass the squirrel lasagna? Yes, same here. I mean, if there's one thing I don't need to try, it's that. But you know, in Peru they eat guinea pigs, don't they? So I guess it's quite similar. But yeah, no, I don't want to eat any furry little mammals. They're too cute, just too cute to be eaten. Anyway, yeah. We had a lot of sex workers in this area historically, maybe not that recently, but because of I think it's 1108, let me cross over, the Bishop of Winchester. He would have been the brother of the king. You know, at the time when the king had some sons, the first one was going to be the heir to the throne, the second one going to the church, you know, like a bishop or anything, and the third one would go into the army, usually. So the Bishop of Winchester, Henry of Blois, he was a bit of a different bishop. He allowed prostitution around here to happen in Southwark. At the time, we were not in the city of London here. We were in a different jurisdiction. And he took a commission out of it. So he was an interesting bishop. They were known as the Winchester geese. So although the bishop would take a commission out of their sex work, they were not allowed to be buried in consecrated ground. So this little ground behind the railings here was an unconsecrated ground to bury those prostitutes. We don't know whether it's as old as the 12th century. We know it's as old as the 1570s, but probably much older. You can visit it, but you'd have to, I think they're probably struggling to get enough volunteers because it's not always open. But yeah, nowadays it's a little garden of remembrance. It has been blessed now since 2015. The developers are fighting to get the ground, you know, because it's very valued property over here. But no, we want to keep it as a little garden of remembrance for those ladies that were. It was not only the prostitutes; it was all the outcasts of society, really. Eventually, it closed down in I think it's 1856 when the parish of Southwark they bought a plot at Brookwood Cemetery. We talked about Brookwood in some of my tours before. That's the cemetery outside of London where they had a train for the dead to go to the cemetery. And yeah, it's a very sad. I mean, it's very sad to imagine all those poor ladies that were buried here. For those of you that live in the UK, you might know the BBC show. What was it called? History Cold Case. There was an episode about a skeleton they took from the burial ground here. It was a girl believed to be 12 years old. She died out of syphilis. And you know, syphilis takes a few years to kill you. So you had some ridiculously young sex workers. Very, very sad. And historical case, I think there's an American version as well. But anyway, that was in the British one. the poor girls as well. The graveyard was very much ravaged by the body snatchers, because we're very close to Guy's Hospital, so they would steal the bodies to sell them to the anatomist, and no one really cared. You know, they were the outcast of society. So yeah, today we pay tributes to them. You know, there's a lot of little gifts that are being brought, and we try to remember them. Anyway, let's get back to Severin Klovski. So he's back in London. He found a new girlfriend. Her name might ring a bell. Her name was Annie Chapman. Now, you might know Annie Chapman, the second raper victim. It's not the same Annie. Some people might say, oh, it might be her daughter. No, it's a different Annie. Chapman was a very popular name. It's a different Annie Chapman. She dated him for a while. They moved in together, and she quickly fell pregnant. And when she got pregnant, he was like, bye, it's not mine. And he had forced her into a threesome as well, or some kind of a ménage à trois. He refused to pay for the child, and he left her. The last she saw of him, he was on a bicycle. He was like, bye, I'm moving to a different borough. But before to leave her, he took something from her, her name. He went, after that day, went with the name George Chapman. So he never answered the name Klovski ever again. And then he met another lady, Mary Spink. Mary, they lived together in some kind of a flat share. Mary was an alcoholic. She had a little boy already. And she had a bit of money. She had about £67,000 in today's money. They got together, but very quickly the landlady, she spotted them kissing in the corridors, and she was like, you two are not married. So one day, they dressed with their best attires. They left, and they said, we're going to get married. They came back, and they said they were married. They were not married. He's still married to Lucy anyway, so there's no chance. And he's probably still married to the other lady in Poland, if he's not killed her. So eventually they moved out. They moved on to Hastings on the south coast, where they bought a shop where they did what they called musical shaves. So George Chapman, aka Severin, was doing the shaving when Mary Spinks was on the piano and she'd be singing. So you could have a bit of live music as well as a shave. At first they make a lot of money, and then no more. Maybe the music was crap, or the shave was crap, who knows. And with that money, they bought a boat, the Mosquito. But he was a crappy sailor. Everyone believed they were going to have an accident one day, and they did. One day, he actually sank the Mosquito. Luckily, the family was rescued by some local fishermen. Some people would argue that it might have been his first attempt in killing his wife. But none of them died. They survived, and they moved back to London. Then he bought a pub in North London, I think in Finchley. You know, when your wife is an alcoholic, why do you buy a pub? I mean, he clearly didn't care about any of them. Talking about pubs, excuse my finger, but down that way, that used to be the site of a pub called the Monument. We're not going to go all the way because there's hardly anything to see today. The pub is long gone. But remember that name, the Monument Pub, because we'll get back to that in a moment. So yeah, he bought a pub in Finchley. And that's when Mary starts to feel very unwell. She's vomiting, she's got diarrhea. A lot of doctors come on visit. They actually got a fake or wrong diagnosis of tuberculosis. And she died. They didn't think much of it at the time. You know, people died at the time fairly quickly. She was buried in the Catholic cemetery, St. Patrick's in Leytonstone. Some of you might remember, we've been there before in my video of the Jack the Ripper victims, because Mary Jane Kelly, the last victim of the canonical five, she's buried there. It's a Catholic cemetery. You know, because he's from Poland, people often assume he was a Polish Jew. He wasn't. He was actually a Catholic. So there's no way he can marry twice, you know, if he's from the Catholic faith. Anyway, For those of you that followed my tours before, you might recognize this little tube. That is a stink pipe, a Victorian stink pipe. You know, at the time, the public sewer, they were full of methane, you know, those gas when the human poo putrefies. So they had to avoid explosions and stuff. They used to have those stink pipes so the gases could come out and above your noses, you know, because it probably wouldn't be the best smell. Anyway, so Mary's dead. He then published an ad to find a new staff to work in his pub, and he very quickly found one, a lady called Bessie Taylor. Bessie came to work for him, and they fairly quickly started a relationship. He was very violent with her. Bessie was a popular lady. They eventually moved to Hertfordshire, to Bishop Stamford, where she's very popular. She's getting involved into charities and stuff. They bought a pub as well called The Grapes in Hertfordshire. And that's when she started to feel unwell. She had some kind of vomiting and diarrhea as well. A lot of doctors were called. And then they decided to move back into London, probably to cover his tracks, because she was very popular down there in town. She had a lot of friends, and some people might have been aware that he was violent. So they moved down here and they bought a pub, the Monument, the one we just mentioned, the one behind me. And she doesn't get any better. She's really suffering. A lot of doctors were called, including some gynecologists. Now I know it might sound a bit odd, but the poison he was using, I didn't tell you, before to leave Hastings, he went to a chemist and he bought 1 ounce of tartar emetic. Tartar emetic, we talked about it when we talked about the Bravo case in West Norwood Cemetery. It is a powder, a bit like a rocky white or beige powder that dissolves into water fairly easily. But if you put it into water, you might taste it. It doesn't taste very nice. So usually they'll put it in a glass of brandy or any alcohol just to hide the taste. And well, Bessie actually, he had a bottle of brandy for her that was labeled, actually, he had written Bessie on it. At the time, they found it very cute. You know, they were like, oh, he's got a bottle for her. Now, in hindsight, of course, we know the bottle was definitely poisoned. You can see the name from here. So we're back at the Crossbones graveyard. So that's the prostitute burial ground. So yeah, Bessie is very unwell, and he weirdly invited some gynecologists, but we might have spoken about that when we talked about the Bravo case. Antimony poisoning, so tartar emetic, it's an antimony. It can lead to vaginal discharge. So a lot of doctors came, they couldn't really find a proper diagnosis, and eventually Bessie died. People didn't think much of it. She was buried. Actually, George pretended to have no money. It's Bessie's family that paid for the funeral. And she was buried, and that was it. Now, the pub, the Monument, George actually burned down his own pub to try to to claim insurance money, but the insurance refused to pay because there were a lot of witnesses that had seen him moving furnitures out, and the till as well. So he was just trying to scam the insurance, but that didn't work. They never paid him. Now, we were just talking about vaginal discharge and stuff, when we are actually right in front of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. That's a coincidence. I didn't plan it when I planned the tour, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, he didn't get the money for his pub, and he bought another pub just around the corner. I'll show you where that is in a moment. And then he placed an ad in the paper again to hire again. And a young girl of 19 years of age applied, Maud Mash. Now, Maud, she's from London, well, she's from Croydon, and her family was very present. That's why that case is very well documented, because her family was around from day one. Actually, when she came to the interview, her mother was there. And her mother, bless her, she's asking all the right questions. She's like, oh, I understand it's going to be a living position. Is there going to be anyone else living in the property? And George is like, yeah, sure, yeah, there's a couple living upstairs. There was no couple. And eventually, she was hired. The parents agreed as well. So little Maud Marsh took the job. And well, very quickly he tried to sleep with her. Actually, Maud sent a letter to her mother saying, oh, he's given me an ultimatum. If I refuse to lie with him, he's gonna sack me. And the mother said, come back. And a couple of days later, she sent a letter back to her mother saying, no, I don't know why I said that. It's all sorted, Mum, don't worry. And at that point, we don't know why, but he decided to pop the question. He decided to ask her, would you marry me? And she said yes. Now, we don't know why. I mean, did she have a crush on him? Maybe. Did she maybe got scared or pressured, or did she get scared to be left on the shelves, you know? At the time, the dynamic between men and women was so different. And she agreed to marry him. He actually produced a will in which he stated that if he was to die, everything would go to her. And the pub across the street, it's called the Blue Maid now, but it used to be called the Blue-Eyed Maid, which sounds like a nice romantic story, but I don't know of any story behind the name. Anyway, back to George and Maud. So they got married. There's no way they could be really married. With Mary Spinks, we know they both pretended to be married. With Bessie, they also got married. We don't really know whether Bessie believed she was marrying him for real or not, but with Maud, she probably did. They went to church. She had someone do a fake marriage ceremony. The parents were not there, Maud's parents. And actually, Maud's mother, she's asking all the right questions. After the marriage, she's like, oh, do you have the marriage, the wedding certificate? And Maud says like, oh, George has already put it away. And Maud's mother, she doesn't really follow up on that. But at that point, Maud got pregnant. And George convinced her that she was too young. She was 19 years of age, but you know, they were married. And he convinced her to have an illegal abortion. It was still very much illegal at the time. We are in, I think, 1901, 1902, 1901, I think. And it worked. I mean, they didn't have the baby, but after that, she started to feel a bit unwell. And that's when he hired a new staff, Florence. And he was all over Florence. Actually, one day, poor little Maud, she spotted him kissing Florence. And she gave him an ultimatum. She was like, you stop that now, or I'm gone. That could be his motive, because it's after that she started to feel very unwell. With Mary Spinks, the motive would have been money. She had a bit of money. With Bessie, honestly, I can't find him any motive whatsoever. With Maud, maybe tired of her because of the new Florence. We don't know, but that's when she started to feel very unwell. But it was a bit harder for him with Maud because, well, first, we are so close to Guy's hospital. She kind of had to go to hospital, you know, and she stayed in there for 12 days, where she felt much better. Obviously, because she was no longer slowly poisoned when she was in hospital. And then she was released and she'd come back. So let me show you the pub. The skinny white building, that's the pub they bought. So that's the Crown pub. Today only the façade survives. The back of the building was destroyed. Let me show you an illustration of the pub at the time. So that's the pub at the time, an illustration. So you see it hasn't changed much. There's nothing inside at the moment. Before COVID there used to be offices, but now I think it's empty. I didn't show you a photo of him. This is Klovski. This is our guy. And actually, you know what? About the time when he came back to London in 91, there was a lady that was attacked there was a lady that had claimed to be attacked by samples, and then they walked all the way to Whitechapel. Somehow no one believed her. Neither did the police, neither did the press. She claimed she was attacked by a guy that claimed to be Jack the Ripper, and eventually she managed to kick him in the balls on run. We don't know why they didn't believe her, but when she described the attacker, she said he was probably Russian or Polish, somewhere foreign, and he had a big mustache, very high cheekbones, and very low eyebrows that seemed to come all the way almost to his eyes. I mean, that seems quite uncanny, you know. It sounds very much like our guy, doesn't it? But anyway, she wasn't believed. There was another case at the time when he would have been here with Bessie, a lady on Dorset Street. Her name was Marianne Austin. She was a sex worker. She'd woken up with a huge pain in her anus, and the guy was already gone when she woke up, but she had been stabbed, I think 12 times in the anus and uteral area. She died, but before to die, she had time to describe her attacker. She said as well that he would have been probably Russian, or foreign accent anyway, with a big mustache and high cheekbones. So again, there were probably a lot of people matching that description at the time, but again, it could be our man. Very well, it could very well be. Now, back to poor little Maud. So she's working at the Crown Pub over here with George, and she's very, very unwell. Her mother was very often here, her mother, her sister. So Chapman wasn't very often left alone to do his dark deeds, but he was giving her a lot of brandy, you know, at the time when you had this type of stomach discomfort, they'll often give you a shot of brandy anyway. And eventually it got so bad that she had to be fed anally. Yes, you've heard this right. She had to be fed anally. I'm gonna cross, hold on, bear with me here, because it's a difficult one. Because there's no little green man over here. I'm gonna cross again, let's go. This church here, it's St. George the Martyr. It was featured in Dickens as well. That's where Little Dorrit got married. It's interesting because you've got St. George the Martyr right next to the pub where George the criminal, George the sinner was based. Anyway, poor little Maud had to be fed anally, and weirdly, George was actually asking customers in the pub, would you like to help me feeding her anally? I mean, why? You know. And I hear you wonder, can you do that? Can you feed someone anally? Yes, you can. But if you don't believe me, if you want to double check, feel free to ask Google. Do not ask ChatGPT. You'd get flagged. I did that yesterday. I was like, this question has been flagged. Apparently, it's a very unacceptable question. So feel free to ask Google, but not ChatGPT. Anyway, so that's what they had to do. And poor little Maud, she's really struggling, and her mother is starting to be very suspicious by this point. Eventually one night they had invited another doctor as well, because they started not to trust the only doctor that was there. So they had invited the family doctor as well. And Maud's mum had told him, if my daughter dies, you're not burying her. We're going for a post-mortem. And the doctor had agreed. And one night, Maud's mum decided to taste the brandy. And she was like, bleh, disgusting. She actually gave a bit to a customer, and the guy was like, yeah, this is not normal. This is not what brandy should taste like. Unfortunately, that was too late. Maud died the next morning. Now, a little pause in our story. I want to show you something down here, and then we'll come back to the main road. This used to be the site of Marshalsea Prison. That was a debtor's prison. You know, at the time in the 19th century, if you didn't pay your baker, you could end up in jail for a debt. That's what happened to John Dickens, Charles Dickens' dad. This wall to my right, it's actually a surviving wall of the prison. That's probably what inspired Little Dorrit, you know, Dickens' dad's story. There's a little memorial on the floor. It's going to be difficult to read, but that's to remember the Marshalsea prison. At the time, you know, the prison complexes, they were run by private stuff. You'd have to pay for your own bed and stuff. Let me show you the sick men wall, the sick men yard. So that was quite inhuman, really. There's hardly anything left of the prison today apart from the wall. And let me remove the sick men yard. And another thing I find funny, let me show you. See the little brickwork in the corner here, both of the corners actually. That's to stop gentlemen urinating, because if you piss in the corner, it would splash back at you. It doesn't really work. I can smell that people have used it today. Well, you can probably see the thing. So people do come down the little dark alleyway anyway, but it's meant to help to prevent people urinating here. Anyway, let's go back to the main road to go back to our murder. So the poor girl is dead, but Maud's mother, she wasn't going to let it go, because the day before, the doctor had told her that Chapman had told him that they were not really married anyway. The mother had no clue that he had pretended, so she started to suspect him. They took Maud for a post-mortem, actually behind. So you know, you've got the church there, St. John the Martyr. At the end of the little alleyway here, that was the end of the graveyard. That's where they had the mortuary, and that's where they had the post-mortem on poor little Maud. Apparently, it is said that the doctors, when they were performing the post-mortem, they heard someone by the door listening. So it was, and then they opened the door and a gentleman was running away. So it was probably Chapman listening at the door to see what was being said. Now, he wasn't very smart, because, I mean, at that point, he should have run. He knew he was being suspected then. He knew they were going to find the poison. He should have run off. But you know why he did not? Because it was going to be the coronation of Edward VII. And this very route, Borough High Street, was going to be on the coronation route. So he didn't want to miss on the earnings from the pub, because that would have been a very busy day at the pub. So he decided to stay open. And that's how he got arrested, because weirdly, when they did the post-mortem, they found traces of arsenic. We don't know why, because she was not murdered with arsenic, but with tartar emetic. Later on, they found the tartar emetic. She had a lot of it in her guts, because sadly, he was also poisoning her anally, would you believe? But yeah, they had enough to convict him of that murder anyway. At the time, one murder was enough to go down to the gallows. They did exhume the two other bodies. And actually, when they exhumed Mary Spink, she had been buried years later. She had been buried with 14 caskets over her. You know, at the time you had those communal graves that could be quite deep. And all the other caskets were smelly and disgusting. When they opened Mary's casket, she was very well preserved. Although she had a layer of mold on her skin, you could recognize her face when she had been buried for years. Apparently, that's exactly what tartar emetic does to you. It dehydrates you so much that you get very well preserved, because you know the bacteria can't develop as much when it's dry. So they did find traces of tartar emetic in her body, and same for Bessie Taylor. So Klovski, well, George Chapman. At that point, when he's in prison, Lucy, the first wife, did try to come and visit. He pretended he did not recognize her. he never ever answered the name Klovski again. Anyway, he was hanged at Wandrose prison for the murder. And after he hanged, it is said that Inspector Frederick Aberline, you know, the main man in charge of the Jack the Ripper story, or investigation, not story, I should say, he went to shake the hand of the police officer on the Chapman case, and he said, "My friend, you've got Jack the Ripper at last." Now, I'm not trying to convince you that he was indeed Jack the Ripper, because I'm not convinced myself. The arguments that would be in favor of him being the Ripper is that, first, the dates and locations, spot on. For all the murders, he would have been around.
This is practice.
Second, well, we know he's a murderer. You know, we've got tons of suspects in the Jack the Ripper story, but a lot of them, you know, there's absolutely no evidence of them being murderers at all. Also, the eyewitness accounts, they were varied, you know. There were a few eyewitness accounts that describe Jack the Ripper as wearing this type of hat. So this is Klovski there with Bessie Taylor. And there were some witnesses describing him as Eastern European, or at least foreign looking. But, you know, at the time of the Ripper murders, he would have been 23 years of age. That is a little bit younger than most of what the witnesses claimed. The witnesses said about 30. Could they be 7 years off? Yeah, definitely. The thing that is against it, it's that when he first came to London, he probably had a strong accent, you know. None of the witnesses had spotted a strong accent. And the only thing that's really against it is the MO. A lot of people would argue that although some serial killers sometimes change their MOs, modus operandus, it's very different from a poisoner, a slow poisoner that would be very almost sadistic, you know, someone that would enjoy seeing their victims suffer slowly. Photograph them, because he was into photography. He would take photos of them suffering. The photography element that actually gave him an excuse to have some chemicals, because some antimony stuff could be used into the development of photography. Sorry, I thought something was moving behind me. It was a bicycle, not the door. And so yeah, can a slow poisoner really be a brutal mutilating serial killer? Some people would say no. I would say yes. Why not? Some people have some killers have different methods for different victims. So, you know, I think he could very well be Jack the Ripper. You know, and he could have done the one in Manhattan as well. In New Jersey, there were also a few shootings. He had, when they did find American guns in the Crown, in the pub. So, you know, maybe. I mean, he was definitely a psychopath, and we know he was there, because even the FBI profilers, they tried to profile Jack the Ripper profile, and they would all agree that he would have to be very local, to live or work very locally. And Klovski definitely did. He was very, very local. In the geoprofiling area, he would have been spot on right there. So, you know, maybe. He's a very good suspect. Now, let me flip this camera around to show you another murder location that has nothing to do with the Ripper. But this little shop here, in 1875, today it's called the Guillotine Barbers, so it's also a barber. But back at the time of the murder, it wasn't a barber. It was, let me show you the sign, the guillotine. It was actually a baker. They were called Turners. Turners what? Turners steam bread. Didn't know you could steam the bread, like a bagel, I guess. Turner steam bread on biscuits manufactory. Victorians were good at very things, but not at names. Their names were often very long and totally useless. Anyway, one morning, someone knocked at the little door on the side of the shop here. The building is the same. It's a rare survivor of Victorian times around here. So they knocked at the door very early morning, before the bakery even opened, and the staff lady that was there, she was like the housekeeper. She was not even the baker lady. Her name was Jane Soper. She opened the door, and the gentleman came in. She had not met him before, but he said to her, "I'm coming to pick up the bread for the Terminus Hotel." She gave him the bread. She didn't know the guy, but she knew that they used to sell bread to the Terminus Hotel. So she gave him the bread, and then he struck her on the head. She fell on the floor. He left with the bread. So he didn't pay for the bread, but he didn't steal anything from the till. He didn't take anything when he could have. And he didn't even make sure that she was proper dead, because she wasn't. She actually was taken to hospital. And then a very enthusiastic doctor was like, "Oh no, she'll recover soon." It actually took a couple of weeks before she passed, and then only they started a murder investigation. A lot of people were interrogated. They had found in the shop a pair of fake whiskers. So they actually blamed the staff that used to work there, that sometimes had a fake barb and a fake mustache, but that didn't lead anywhere. Then the police officers actually they found the lead, a guy that was accusing his brother-in-law. They actually kind of shadowed them around, and eventually they arrested them. It does look like they were kind of trying to frame them. We don't know why, but there was nothing against those guys either. And the two police officers, they turned up to be crooks anyway. They were completely bent. They, a couple of years later, they realized that they were taking bribes to cover up for some gangs and stuff. So we don't even know why they would try to frame someone. Maybe just because they wanted to look like good police officers, you know, to be productive, but who knows. Anyway, the murder was never solved. So we don't know who killed little Jane Soper. Did they really mean to kill her anyway, or was it just someone that had strong mental health issues? We don't know, because it's a crappy murder. You know, he didn't even check that she was dead. And if it's a robbery, it's a crappy robbery, because all they got is bread. Probably not even fresh, because the baker was not even open yet. But anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions before we go. Thanks, Marilyn. That's great to hear. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you along. If any of you dropped me a little tip on PayPal or buy me a coffee, that's very, very much appreciated. You can also do that on YouTube if you prefer to use the little $sign. You can as well. Let me know if you have any questions before we go. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks for coming, everyone. It's always amazing to have you along. If you want to see a bit more of me, next Thursday, so in a few days only, we're going down to Stockwell. So that's a new location. We've never been before. Well, we've been quite close when we've been to Brixton, but we've never been to Stockwell. So that's coming up in a few days. Thanks, Pauline. That's very, very much appreciated. I very much rely on your generosity, so every little helps in terms of tips. Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks, Herbie. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for coming, guys. If you've missed the beginning, feel free to watch the replay in the next few days. And if any of you were completely new to me, if if you've made it that far into the video, you might want to consider subscribing. If you want to make sure you see those live and not catch the replay in the next weeks or days or months, the best way to do that live is to click the little subscribe and then notify me bell. That's how you get a notification when I go live, because it's much nicer to enjoy those tour lives and be able to interact in the chat and all that. Of course, you can always watch it as a video, you know, like a replay, but it's more fun to be with us in the chat. So if you wanted to make sure you can join the live next time, make sure you subscribe. Thanks, Tanya. Thanks, Tish. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. Hopefully, I'll see a lot of you on Thursday. If not, the week after that, we're going back to Holborn. So that's the area of the British Museum. Thanks, Dessa. Thanks, Laurie. That'll be around, that's on a Sunday night as well, I think. Is it? Yeah, I think it is. So that's about the same timing as today. Cool. Thank you, guys. Have a great evening, a great morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.